Good evening for those of you for whom it is already night. I wish you a good one. Even though my time is very limited, I decided to stop by anyway to see what's going on here and how you manage to deal with the flow of information presenting. To be honest, the situation is quite unfortunate. It seems everyone has either forgotten or never learned how to work with information without just swallowing it hastily like a stork with a frog. Instead, it's important to gather oneself and truly think. That's why today we'll be relearning a bit. As you say, everything new is just a forgotten old. Today I'll be presenting additional information and we'll try to remember how to work with it. I'll start by saying that there are two civilizations in this illusory world, the Western and the Eastern. You belong to the Western civilization as Russia was created by Satan and governed by the children of Lilith and Satan, the Freemasons. The Pope is the representative on earth of the self-proclaimed god Satan. He is a spiritual leader of Western civilization. And when he dissolved all the states, resigned his powers, and indicated that the leader of the administrative pyramid should manage on their own, he dissolved the states of Western civilization. The Western civilization on the European continent include the following states: Italy, Spain, France, Germany, Belgium, Denmark, etc. Added to that was the Scandinavian peninsula, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and so on. Meanwhile, the so-called Empire of Maritime Island States was created. This empire included former states of the Western civilization, Australia, the United Kingdom, and the USA. This alliance is called AUKUS. Not a single country from the European Union, from the European continent, is part of this empire. All we dissolved the states, among them, by the way, also former post-Soviet republics, as after the collapse of the USSR they became colonies of the USA. Russia, not the Russian Federation, is a continental state. Now we come to another question, and to a very widespread misconception. What exactly is a maritime island state? For example, Italy has long had a fleet and sailors who travel the seas. Spain had port cities and a fleet and even went to war with Great Britain. France also had a fleet, not to mention the Dutch trading fleet. Even Russia under Peter the Great built ships and created fleets in the Baltic Sea, later in the Black Sea and even Vladivostok. Are states with port cities and fleets considered maritime island states or not? For your information, no, they are not. Many states have airports and planes fly, but they are not therefore air states. Ships are means of transportation. Ports are places for exchange and delivery of goods. From history, you know that, for example, Spain had a large military fleet and fought wars with Great Britain. A military fleet is a military unit for continental states to wage war against maritime island states. As you see, little thoughts and not to realize that all UA states, France, Spain, Italy, even the Netherlands, Sweden, etc., regardless of whether they have ports, ships, be they commercial or military, are not maritime island states, and the Admiralty law system does not apply to them. The so-called naval fleet is a branch of the armed force intended for military conflicts between continental and island nations. After the Pope dissolved the states of Western civilization, that is the entire continental part of Western civilization, he turned it into an ownerless structure inhabited by savages. For your information, this is also included all the former republics of the USSR and the so-called countries of the former Eastern Bloc, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary, Poland, and others. This was the work of the bio-robot, Gorbachev, who led the USSR to capitulate and lose the Cold War to the United States. Once he had completed his task, the next in line was the Pope, who continued the dismantling of the continental part of Europe as a civilized state-based society. Who among you remembered the events, say, of a decade or more ago, can tell how the process of dismantling the European continent was marked, when Europe was given the black mark. Perhaps it is time for a reminder. This was the event that known as Brexit, when Great Britain declared it was leaving the European Union. We discussed this event at the time and I explained that the shepherd was leaving his flock to fend for itself. Let's recall now that even from Gorbachev's time the Germans remember very well the fall of the Berlin Wall and the withdrawal of Russian, or rather Soviet troops from Germany. However, German reunification did not mean freedom, and the FRG did not gain independence from the United States. It remained a colony. Gorbachev simply handed over the part of Germany that was a Soviet colony to the United States. Now Germany had become a full colony of the United States. I have often said that Germany, Russia and Japan share the same fate. They are all colonies of the United States. Thus, while Russia and the former of the USSR defeated Hitler's Germany, the United States won World War II. The so-called continental state fought among themselves, but in the end they lost to one of the major maritime island nations. The United States emerged victorious. You probably know that after the end of the war in 1945, a conflict between the USSR, Great Britain and the United States was expected, but this was prevented by the USSR developments of nuclear weapons. Now let's try to look at the situation from above and summarize how everything actually stands in the illusion in order to have a realistic view of what is happening. For many it was unclear how the Pope could dissolve all states, while countries like China, India, Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel and others still exist. After the Pope's statement in 2014, the entire European continental region became an orderless structure. What happened next? Who remembers? What major events happened then? The meetings between the Pope and the head of the Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, followed by the gathering of religious leaders of the conference in Astana, at which the Pope participated. Now let's consider what the meeting between Patriarch Kirill and the Pope in Cuba might have meant, after which the Vatican began to hold masses for Lucifer. What document did Kirill sign in Cuba with the Pope, and the implementation of this agreement was later discussed in Astana? Through this agreement was confirmed that the Pope was handing over the ownerless territory of Europe to representatives of the Eastern civilization. From that moment on, the destruction of Europe and the white race began. The well-known talking head whom you likely know well, Andrei Devyatov, began to speak openly about the formation of the so-called Third Horde in alliance with China. But everything was turned upside down by the policies of your President Vladimir Putin, who shifted to the side of so-called Western Europe. Then began the process of cleansing the territory of natives that the inhabitants of the former European Union states had become. Why do smart people say that the Russian Federation or Russia is not fighting Ukraine, but rather in the United States, and that this war is a conflict between a maritime island state empire and the Russian Federation, which is striving for independence from the US and seeking to break free from American influences in its former Soviet Union colonies, within the borders established after World War II? We find ourselves in a situation that can only be described as a Gordian knot, but we will try to untangle it. The US is a maritime island state, part of the island state empire AUKUS, of which the Russian Federation is also a colony with its own colonies. The Russian Federation's desire to gain sovereignty from the US is thus an internal matter within the island state empire, which should be resolved between the US and the Russian Federation. However, this issue is not being addressed through a direct conflict between the US and the Russian Federation, but rather through its representative colonies, the US via its colony Ukraine and the Russian Federation via its colony Russia. At the same time, the US is also employing the other colonies, specifically from European states and the NATO alliance, which are providing financial and military support to Ukraine in its conflict with Russia. Let's go back to the original statement, and the fool didn't get it. This refers to the inclusion of the Ukrainian military units to the Kursk region, with the Ukrainian analysts commenting on the situation without understanding that Ukraine is not fighting to the Russian Federation, part of the maritime island state colony of the US, but rather fighting to the colony of Russia, which is itself the Russian Federation. This is a military conflict between two colonies. As the saying goes, natives are fighting each other on both sides, where the two adversaries look on to see who will prevail. The natives representing US interests are being supplied with weapons by other European tribes like Germany, Poland and France. Meanwhile, the US itself is also supplying additional new weaponry, which has created a serious situation in US-Russian Federation's relations. The Russian Federation felt compelled to send a warning to the US stating that if it allows its allies to attack with American-supplied weapons, it will respond with a nuclear strike against the command center, escalating to an internal conflict within the island state empire itself, which will be indisable for the empire as a whole. And the news moved the question, has the fool still not figured it out, or is he just playing dumb? I was referring to this Ukrainian analyst who tried to analyze the military conflict situation, where Ukrainian military units ended up in the Kursk region, and the behavior of the Russian President Vladimir Putin is response. What kind of analysis and disquisitions about the Russian president can this be if the analyst doesn't even understand who's fighting whom? This is military conflict between two continental structures, tribes without legal status. If this internal continental conflict between colonies, neither the US nor the Russian Federation can directly intervene with military force, but only covertly as the elites of the US, NATO and other colonies are doing. And so we've started to pull on one end of this Gordian knot. Well, let's approach it from another angle. The US is controlled by the Illuminati, who represents the East. With whom then is the Russian Federation under Putin's leadership at war? With the Freemasons or the Illuminati? What do you think? With the East or the West? With the East, with the Eastern civilization, which includes India, China, Pakistan and others. Since the East is outside the Pope's jurisdiction, it has retained social so-called state structures. Now the East is trying to seize and claim territory of continental Europe through its control of the maritime island states, was seeking to eliminate unnecessary populations, replacing them with bio-robots and cyborgs. This has been set in motion by activating suicide program within the population of former states. To the zombie states, some of which are even possessed nuclear weapons, a war is being ignited between colonies, Ukraine and Russia. Other weaponry, financial and economic resources are being diverted to Ukraine, so that despite Russia, a colony of Russian Federation, President Putin has warned the US, which is supplying new weapons to Ukraine. If they are used, he will be forced to launch a nuclear strike on the command center, the US itself. Even in this scenario, the East gains the advantage of the primary command center governing the maritime and island states is not the US but in the East. Such a strike will start a new war between the Russian Federation, Russia and the East, that is the Eastern civilization, thus untie the Gordian knot. President Putin does not intend to eliminate Europeans' population, the white race, as the Eastern civilization plans to do. In the event of a war with the Eastern civilization, he will need allies from continental Europe. But we are only just beginning to untangle this Gordian knot, and to fully untie it, we will have to do a lot more work together. As I have said before, this is an illusion, a platform for modeling, and we are only beginning to untangle this Gordian knot. So we will have to go deeper, to the root causes of everything that is happening. The sovereign of the universe, the first, Velas.